Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where last episode we kind of did half of our mining module and half of our life support module. For the moment, the life support module is on hold because we need to get our mining module there first, was what we determined. So that's absolutely fine, and of course, what we need to do at this point is we've got this gantry for our sky crane. We need to make another gantry down here, assuming that we can't have like a docking port or a decoupler that just attaches to the bottom of these. Yeah, that's not a thing. So we need to make another gantry down here. So I want to take a look at what we've got up top, where it's connecting and the like. Yeah, okay, gotcha. So we just want to slap this guy in, not angled like that, that's for sure. About there or so. Okay. Luckily, this thing is nice and centered, so that is absolutely wonderful. So let's go into structural, and we're going to make the same gantry on the bottom, and that's going to connect to our main rocket. So that's going to, of course, be a modular girder segment that goes here and here. Then a modular girder hub here and here. And then a modular girder segment that is rotated like that, and it goes there, and again, and again. There we go. Now this doesn't quite connect together, that's fine. We'll connect it via strut, so we'll go from here to here, and then we'll go from here to here. Okay. Now, if we really feel like it's necessary, we could run a strut from like here to here and connect to these micronodes. This may be something that we want to do if we run into wiggle issues. For the moment, I'm going to hold off on that. What we need to do here is we need to have our, like, this would be what would be responsible for getting rid of our horizontal velocity, right? So this is going to need to be a fairly large fuel tank. This is going to be a Rockamax size, almost certainly. This is Carbonine. We're going to go into Rockamax size. Here we go. So it would end up being something kind of like this, although this positioning is very much not where I want it to be. That's for sure. We're going to move this guy right on down and just try to center it a little bit here. We want to get that center of mass to be approximately correct, and that's pretty close. But I think we can just squeak it over just a smidge more, like that. And that should give us what we need for our core rocket. But we definitely want to strengthen this up a little bit because we're going to want to do something like this. So struts that then connect out to here. Okay, so that should be relatively fine there. Now this thing is going to be interesting to lift. There's no doubt about that. Let's move it up a little bit. That'll definitely need to happen. And then we're going to have this be a Poodle engine here. Now, we're probably going to want to have extra fuel for this stage, like we did for the previous vehicle. But for now, I'm just thinking about how we might want to go about doing that. That would require removal of these struts if we wanted to have it be, like, quad-coupled, like we did with the other, which we may or may not want to do. If we did that, we'd want to turn snapping back on. There we go. And it would end up being something like this. So we would have additional 200s about here. The main problem with this is I really want to put a hemispherical nose cone on these, which means that we're going to have to adjust their height, which is fine. We can do that. And this is going to be, like, in terms of identity, certainly at least a descendant of our previous contraption. It's going to be along the same sort of lines anyway. I don't want this to be quad coupled for right now, just a singular strut going like this. There we go. And then I want to have it quad coupled that is like this. And then not quad coupled, once again, a singular strut that connects down like that. That didn't quite connect the way I wanted it to. I guess if we connected it from the bottom directly like this, that'll be fine. Okay. So we've got a strut connector out over here too, and we should probably consider running a strut line in like this. Then we want to think about fuel. right? I want to do the same thing that we did before, except I want to codify it. So what that ends up meaning is that we want to run our fuel line from this tank into this tank, like that. And then we want to do the same thing over here. So from this tank to this tank. Then we want to run a fuel line from here to here. And on this side as well, from here to here. So that should make it so that the fuel drains from these tanks first, and then they can be jettisoned, and then from these tanks. And that, of course, means that we should split up these stages. So this one, can we not split it? Hang on. I want to select just this one and this one. There we go. Excellent. So that's now split correctly, and that should be absolutely great. This should go here, of course. Okay. So that's fine. This is a little bit of a truncation here, but, you know, whatever. I'm sure that this whole thing is incredibly aerodynamic. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm not sure about that at all. I strongly suspect that this will, in fact, not be fine. But let's go ahead and get ourselves a TD25 decoupler. So that's going to go right here. And then we're going to want to have some fuel tanks here, like we did previously. So this is going to end up being probably another 32 tank here. And then I'm thinking out on this side, we would do 16s and then 8s. Maybe this would actually fit 32s. So it would go something kind of like this, and then we'll just have this remain as it is, although ISA is kind of a cool pattern. We could have it be something else, but I think for now this will be fine. We'll have this tank be orange, and then I am going to put one other small tank here. So we're going to want to have a fuel line that runs like this, and we want to have a decoupler here. So let's definitely put in a TD25 decoupler here. That's going to go there. And then that fuel line runs into this center stack. From there, we'll have a couple of Jumbo 64 tanks. So one there and one there. Those will, of course, be orange because orange tanks are best tanks. And then we will just have our boosters. So this is going to be the... Thumpers are the wrong size, are they not? Yeah, they absolutely are. We want... Pollexes are the wrong size as well. Thoroughbreds. That's what we want. Okay, so I'm noting the height disparity here. We're going to want to have some amount of additional fuel here then. So that seems okay. We can go for the X16. We want still more. What if we toss in an X8? Still more? We'll go for another 32 then. Even that, we actually kind of still want more. This is a lot of fuel. This is going to be pretty underpowered. Well, we're going to have some burnout timing issues. Unless we just wanted to make this stack be liquid fuel. To be honest, that might be our best bet here, is to make this stack also be liquid fueled. So I would like to bring this down ever so slightly, like that. There we go. That's a little bit better. And then we can have this all be mainsails here. So that would be a mainsail here, and then mainsails out here like this. This needs to be lifted up a little bit, which is not terribly shocking. We can do something about like that, and this should do the trick. We, of course, do want to strut this together a little bit, so let's put some struts here and some struts here to just solidify that somewhat. And then we've got struts up here, struts up here. It should be relatively solid. What's the thrust to weight on this? Well, our staging is very broken. Let's have these and this be here. And then these decouplers would fire. So I do expect that we're going to, this is our center of mass here. We're probably going to have less of a tipping problem than we did with the last booster. This is a little more expensive because we're liquid fueling it, but with the amount of fuel weight that we had here, this is still 1.12. So that's pretty low on the thrust to weight. I'm not terribly shocked about that. This is a lot of fuel. We could strip out the X8 here and here and just lower the, or actually reduce the amount of fuel in each of these stacks. So that puts us at pad thrust to weight of 1.16. Okay. I'm going to put this out there. This is a simulated launch. I want to test aerodynamic characteristics, bending, and we're going to be very, very slow. This is a very underpowered booster right now. That's understood. That's not really the point of this test, although I want to see firsthand exactly how badly it performs. If it performs well enough in the upper atmosphere, it may not be a problem. But that depends a lot on our aerodynamic characteristics and whether we tumble or not without any fins. So we'll see. It's very low thrust to weight. That's absolutely understood. We're noting some definite bouncing here. Okay, that is absolutely noted. Let's put ourselves into surface up and let's see just how bad this is. Bouncing here indicates that we may have a weak joint, well, right here and right here, which isn't terribly surprising. We don't have those strutted. Definitely got an oscillation going on there, and that is at those points that I expected. We're pretty solid here, but yeah, that oscillation is significant. Doesn't really matter all that much. Let's keep, at least for this test, let's keep an eye on the oscillation, but the real interesting question here is, how's that thrust to weight looking? Well, it's improving, and this thing is bending so much. That's really funny, actually. It shouldn't be a problem once we get it out into space. This should be a just liftoff problem. That oscillation is not getting better, so that's noted. And let's check in on our apoapsis here. We're at about 4. Yeah. So we're up to about 1.5 thrust to weight now. That's noted. And we can see these stacks, they're almost half burned already. So our thrust to weight is definitely very, very low. There's no doubt about that. We may end up not having this be liquid fueled and go with solid fuel. And this obviously needs to be addressed, but for the moment, that's fine. We're going to crank this over to orbital prograde in an aerodynamic stress test. That's quite solid, actually. I mean, that's bending extraordinarily significantly, but we can definitely see where the joint weakness there is. That's not an issue. And yeah, now we're starting to have a problem, but this problem is caused by the bend. So I don't think that's actually that significant of a problem. So what I want to do here is I want to come in here, and I just want to run a strut from here to, I would do it here, but I'm actually thinking about doing this strut to, well, let's see how this goes. If we just do the strut here to here, and then from here to here, like that. And then we could try the same thing up here, but to be honest, we don't have as much space. We could just run a strut from, say, here to here, and then over on this side as well, from here to here. Let's see if that evens it out. It should at least reduce it. But I would prefer to have this be connected to the greater rocket region. We'll see if this does the trick. If not, we'll just move it directly down to the rocket. We know the joint weakness was on those docking ports, and those should be the only joint weaknesses on this craft. It shouldn't be nearly as big of an issue as the previous one. But we're still very underpowered on that stage. It looked like it was less bouncy, so there's that. I'm going to physics warp this as a bit of a test. We're definitely still seeing an oscillation there. It is less of one. Okay, that's exciting. Gotta love physics warp tests. They really reveal the weaknesses with those sorts of areas. So we'll pull this back, and I'm going to leave those struts where they are, but I want to put in some additional struts. If they can reach, I would like to run a strut from here to here, and then from here to here, and then from here to here, and then from here to here. It's not the prettiest, but that should result... I really don't like how this strut is clipping through. Actually, it's not clipping through, is it? It just sneaks in there. Okay, that should add a lot of rigidity, in theory. Let's see if that does the trick. So we're looking for additional rigidity there. That is definitely going to be needed. This is once again a bit of a monstrosity, but I mean, we expect that. That's very normal. Monstrosities are the way. There's no doubt about that. Okay, we're looking for the bounce right here as soon as it loads in. Any moment now. Very little bounce. I like it. We're going to put this in surface up, throttle up, and off we go. Oscillation much more under control. Time for a physics warp test. Beautiful. Now time for a stress test on aerodynamics. So I'm just going to physics warp us forward here until we're in apoapsis of about 10. And separation is still likely a concern here with this rocket design. I have no doubt about that. And let's take this to orbital prograde. That's pretty clean. Now, obviously, our time to apoapsis is holding right now as we're doing this. Our thrust to weight is actually pretty okay at this point. It's up to 2.08. Time to apoapsis is currently dropping. I'm going to kill rot, because we need to push that out a little bit. We probably need more vertical speed in an actual setup here, but we're just going to burn here until our side tanks burn off. I expect separation issues here, and I also expect a very, very low thrust to weight from our center core. So we'll see how that goes. 2, 1, 0. Hey, look, separation issues. Okay, so that was definitely a separation issue, no doubt about that. That's not very surprising. So what we can do in order to fix that is we could use separatrons to try to just push them out and away. We can have the separatrons be somewhere up over here. So here we go, separatrons. And I want this in quad symmetry. So we're going to have these be rotated about like that. And about like that. I'm going to have 2 of them in this top section. And then I'm going to only have 1 in this bottom section. So the idea here is it's going to kick out this side faster than this side, but the whole thing is going to be moved away from our rocket. That's the concept, anyway. So all of these here are separatrons, and they just need to be fired at the same time as this decoupler. So all of those just move in here. To be honest, it'll be easier to just move the decoupler. So we'll do that, and that looks good. Although this should not be in this stage, obviously. Yeah, the mainsails need to be down here. That usually would help. There we go. Something along those lines. Perfect. So now what we need to do is see if that fixed our separation issue, and if it did, we then need to see what our thrust to weight is going to be like for our center core. Our center core is going to have a decent amount of fuel, but its thrust to weight is going to be low. We've got a very, very heavy intermediate core here, or intermediate stage, and the actual payload is pretty heavy too. So we'll see what that ends up feeling like. Let's put this into surface up, throttle up, and off we go. I'm not going to go over at 10 kilometers here. That was a stress test. That's not the actual altitude that we want to start rotating at. The fact that we passed that stress test was kind of huge. I like it. That's very good. So we're going to be going to orbital prograde here eventually, but for the time being, we just want to push that apoapsis right on up. I think we'll try at about 20 kilometers. This is not for purpose of aerodynamics. Our aerodynamics was actually fine. This thing actually flies pretty well, surprisingly. But what I'm trying to do right now is dial in our vertical versus horizontal speed ratio, and that's... I really feel like we needed a little bit more vertical speed there. We were quite low still. Even if our separation had been clean on that last simulation, then I don't think we would have made it to orbit. I don't think we would have had the thrust. So we're just going to go straight up until about 20 kilometer periapsis, or rather apoapsis. A 20 kilometer periapsis would be a very long burn indeed. Literally an infinite burn if we're just going straight up. The periapsis is never going to go to 20... Actually, it might eventually make it to 20 just based on orbital, like, motion. We might miss the planet on the way back down if we go high enough, but I think that would just be an escape velocity at that point. So we're at 18 right now, 19, and 20. We're heading over to prograde. Excellent. We want to see this timer continue to increase even as we're at prograde. So we can see our apoapsis is currently at 29, 30, 31. That's looking good. Time to apoapsis continuing to increase at this time. So we're going to be ditching this stage pretty soon, and I do expect a very low thrust to weight when that happens. Let's see what that thrust to weight ends up looking like. Much better detachment. Oscillation building up here. We can gimbal limit this down to about 20% gimbal. That should help. Or we could run struts from here to here. That would probably help too. But that would be a little awkward to do. So our apoapsis is high enough at this point. I want to move to horizontal velocity up. And time to apoapsis is going down right now. So we actually need to hold and just burn here. I see our orbital velocity is increasing, but 0.76 is indeed, as expected, a quite low thrust-to-weight ratio. I'm deeply unsurprised by that. But we'll see how close we end up getting. And I don't like our current position overall. I'm just manually adjusting it a little bit to be at a 90-degree heading. Watching that time to apoapsis continue to very, very slowly tick down, I'm thinking we're just going to move this back to orbital prograde for right now. Yeah. For the moment, that's okay. We can target pretty high orbit. We've got another 80 seconds of burn time in this main core here, so that is going to accelerate us up a decent chunk. This is going to get us most of the way to orbit, actually. Not quite all of the way. But this is going to get us further than I expected it to. The main issue is that time to apoapsis. And there's definitely a small oscillation still. Let's move this down to a 10% gimbal limit. See if that cleans up the oscillation. It's better. It's not a terrible oscillation. This is a manageable setup. Unfortunately, we are definitely continuing to approach that apoapsis. So that is, you know, not great. I'm going to take us over. I'm putting us back in Kilrot, and we're just going to angle up a little bit here. We need a little more vertical speed. Holding at 30. Going up. Now that's going to change eventually. But as you can see here, this is close-ish to orbital velocity. It's not quite there. Why do I have 2 decouplers here? Hang on. Something's wrong here. Yeah, this is incorrect. This should go here. This should go here. Okay. There we go. So for now, we are busily working on making our way into orbit, but we do need a little bit more vertical speed than this. So we can definitely adjust that. I'm gimbal limiting this down to about 10% as well. And yes, I'm aware that we don't have solar panels on this, and yes, I'm aware that's a problem. It's absolutely an issue. I'm just curious to see if this will actually make orbit. It's pretty close. I think if we just adjusted our overall trajectory a little bit, I think this would make orbit. So that's definitely good to know. Currently, we're going back down, and that's understood. If we were to do our gravity turn at 25, maybe 30 kilometers, I think we could make orbit with it. It's not efficient. We could definitely use more power in that first stage. But that was definitely, I think, a viable test. I think we could have put it into orbit there with a slightly different setup. Now, we do need some form of power generation on this. And what I'm thinking for that right now is simply 1x6s, 2 of them, or I guess 4 is fine. And we could just put them right there. And then we could have a battery like up here, maybe like a Z200, a Z1000? Z1000 fits. Okay, something like that. That would be the idea. So obviously, this is still going to be a bit of a nightmare. We're going to need to get this thing into orbit. That's going to be a mission for next episode. We can try to soup up this stage a little bit if we want some more power in it. We could maybe change out some of these mainsails here for a slightly higher power engine, although mainsails are a pretty high-powered engine. There's no doubt about that. But, I mean, vectors are 1,000, and mainsails are a little bit higher than that. I think they're 1,500 in terms of their sea level thrust, or that's their vacuum thrust. Their sea level thrust is 1,379. Well, we can look into it and see what we want to do. We can also get some launch assist SRBs off over here. That would be pretty cheap, just to get us going a little bit faster off the pad. That's maybe not a bad idea either. Just some quick-burning SRBs. We'll see. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings. And a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Dark Horse, Ethan Feldman, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, Rornaz, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.